what we do is we want to shake this stone up just enough so we can see these natural cracks that are in the stone. You give me an order for unfading green, we're up there. I say 4 to 6 weeks we'll have your order done. You give me a 100-square order. It's only going to take us a week to produce the order. But 4 or 5 weeks to get into the good stone. Biggest roofing slate we've ever made was 40 inches long, 40-inch randoms, 2 inches thick. And the smallest are 12/6 1/4-inch thick. This stone lays like this. This is the leaf. The grain is this way. You have to make your slate on grain. Little tiny fast history of Camara Slate. My dad got into the business. My grandfather was a farmer. He owned a slate quarry. They tried it there for a couple of years. My dad was 19, 20. My grandfather said, hey, this farm isn't big enough for both of us. Why don't you try to get into the slate business? He got into the slate business. He was buying from local quarries and selling floor tile and flagstone. Roofing slate wasn't a big market in the 60s. So what happened was he'd throw on a load of flagging, he'd drive to Boston, and he'd sell it. And it was a business that was tough. I mean, you're peddling, is what you're doing. But he said, well, you know, I'll be taking baby steps, and he didn't own any quarries then. He bought from local quarries. He knew some guys, and he'd bring the slate out there, and hopefully he would put a little seed in the ground and sell to that guy in a couple of years in the spring if he needed more. So, you know, he'd always be out peddling. Michigan was a big area for us. New York State, Pennsylvania, New England. So, as the years went on, my dad was a saver, very frugal. He wanted to buy a slate quarry, and no bank would lend us any money to buy a slate quarry because they said, you want to do what? He graduated up to owning a tractor trailer truck. And what Dad would do, Dad was a lot of times in the 80s and late 70s, Dad was the go-to guy that when there was a load of slate that was late for a friendly competitor, a load of roofing, they would call Dad because Dad would be the only guy that would drive straight to Louisiana without a break. We feel that the best size slate you can go with is a 10 or 12 inch wide slate, 1812, 1810. We think that over time, that's going to be the longest lasting slate. Years ago, they made heavies, and they made heavies only out of the slate that wouldn't split to a #1 slate, which is 3/16 of an inch. How many roofs have you got into that's 60 years old, the slate's 3/4 to an inch, and you ring it and you say, this is the punkiest slate I've ever seen. Why is this slate garbage? This doesn't make sense. Well, it does make sense because years ago, that was a byproduct of the 3/16 of an inch slate. Everybody made their slate 3/16 of an inch. And often, when we're buying used slate, people will say, hey, I got a nice school down in Massachusetts or Connecticut, and it's graduated roof. You want that for used slate? I said, no. And they say, why not? I say, well, it's probably garbage. We make roofing slate, we make floor tile, and we make flagstone, those 3 groups. What is the wrong? When you get into a piece of slate and you're splitting it down, it won't split into quarter. It kind of rubs off, it runs off. And we don't force anything into quarter. If it doesn't make quarter, even though we have an order that the guy's there with a gun, we say, no, we're going to make 3/8 out of this. We're not going to force the stone. We're going to put it in the 3/8. We're going to put it on the bank. We'll sell it someday. People say to me often, they say, Sean, what does it cost per square to make your slate? And I say, you know something, I don't know. And they say, you've been in business 20 years, you don't know? In my business, production, 1 week it'll be 200 square, the next week it'll be 120. And the guys work hard inside. It's just the quality of stone that came to them. Not quality meaning it's a bad quality. There's 2 kinds of qualities. There's slate that's going to last 100 years, and then there's workmanship, or we say workmanship. Sometimes the stone that comes to you, it's got a lot of flint, or the stone's real small. You know, they work as many hours, but they didn't get as much production because maybe I guess the best way to say it is it was small stone. It's like putting on 12 randoms versus 18 randoms. You know, it's just you know, the SRCA, NSA. Me, as far as the slate company owner, I'm ecstatic about it because what I'd love to see, now you guys are going to think this is swearing, but I'd love to see everybody be able to know how to do slate roofing, and then the cost of roofing could come down and it'll be more of an affordable product to the end user. Then I hear the word gray green. And I said, tell is gray green. I mean, they look pretty identical. When it's all said and done, they look pretty close. I've seen some sea greens that are real brighter green. I've seen some sea greens that people call sea green that are a little bit grayer green. If you get into a 100-foot quarry, at the top of the quarry and the bottom, I don't care what color you are, it will change. And it just changes. It's one of the beautiful things about slate. They're making 3 8 and a half. 3 8 and a half. That's going to Utah. When you're splitting this stone, when you're splitting it, when you snap it, if it doesn't go all the way, never trace it. And what tracing it is you're putting your chisel here. I've been to a lot of mom and pop quarry businesses, and what they'll do is they split it here and it doesn't go all the way, it starts going off. So they'll come over here and they'll put the chisel here. What you're doing is you're starting another cleave. You're starting another cleave in the stone. And what happens is that when it goes to the trimmer will trim it, the puncher will punch it, and when it gets to the roofer, hopefully he'll catch it and ring it and say, this isn't ringing out. We can't put this on. It doesn't look bad, but we can't put this on. The reason you need your blocks real square is that if we want to trim an 1812, you have to make it 1913. If it's off square 1913, you're not going to make an 1812. You're going to make a 1612, an 1810 or 11. That's not the size we want to make. We can still use it, we can still sell it, but it's not that's not the size we want to make for the order. So we bring them down here, we put them on that trimmer. What happens is there's little like saw blades. There's little saw blades that have got little diamond segments on them, and they hit into the slate comes through it, and it chops that edge to make the trimmed edge. Make that trimmed edge. It hits here, it goes into here, it hits a trigger right here, and then it brings it through that saw. When you punch a slate by hand, you gotta look at the slate. Boom, boom, punch it. You can look at the slate. You gotta look at the slate. If you don't look at the slate, there might be a little knot up here. When they let's say this is a pallet, the slates are all made, I take 10 pieces off, I put them in a drill press, they drill. I take 10 more, drill. Faster. If one of those slates are broken and it's drilling, the drill's not going to fall apart. Well, guess who's going to break for it? You guys. Okay? It's slower. You don't make out as well, but I think the product's better. There's really 3 kinds of semi-weathering slates. Usually if it says the word unfading in front of it, it won't ever turn. If it says semi-weathering, it'll turn 20 to 80%. If it says the word Vermont black, Vermont Malagray black, those are slates that the roof turns evenly or has a very small percentage that'll turn to buffs and browns. So there aren't quarries that turn really brown, and then there's some that turn mildly. So this is our finishing yard. This is our finishing yard, and I guess that's it. Bye.